Well, good evening here on this Saturday night in mid-June after the Matchroom Boxing main event win for Richardson Hitchens. Can't say it's that big of a surprise. He dominated and defeated George Kambosos by KO this evening. And we're ready to talk about the entire fight card on this Saturday. Something special, something exclusive for you folks on the YouTube channel of Big Fight Weekend. I am merely the somewhat competent host, TJ Rives. Hello to the insider, Big Dan Rafael, who's been taking it all in as well tonight from the Madison Square Garden Theater in New York. We're going to talk about the whole show, but most importantly and prominently is the Hitchens win. Good to be with you. I started with not unexpected, dominant performance by Hitchens, so welcome in. That's the overall first thought, right?
TJ, I said it all along from the moment this fight was made. Preposterous that this was a mandatory. But as I have said 1,000 times, the IBF doing IBF things. George Kambosos, look, I have nothing against George. Great guy, a warrior spirit, no doubt about it. Can never take away the massive win that he had against Teofimo Lopez. You know, that'll be forever part of his legacy. Great victory. But since then, he's now 2-4. One of those two is highly questionable against Maxie Hughes. Obliterated tonight by Hitchens. Previous fight was his first fight at 140 against just a regular, obscure, unknown type opponent. Prior to that, annihilated badly by Lomachenko at 135 in a vacant title fight. Prior to that, the Maxie Hughes fight, where a lot of people, myself included, thought that Maxie was the rightful winner of the fight. And then before that, two absolute one-sided routs by Devin Haney. So, look, he's had a good career. He's made a tremendous amount of money off of one victory of note. And he took an absolute beating tonight against Richardson Hitchens. Not known, by the way, as a big puncher, but a tremendous jab, which he really put to use. And I think, Richie really had it in his mind, partly just to prove it to himself, partly because of what he'd heard from his promoter, from fans, maybe some media, that he could step it up a little bit. He didn't have to go out there and be reckless, but just put the pedal to the metal here and there and make it at least a little more crowd-pleasing, which he definitely did. That was an entertaining, one-sided ass-kicking. I thoroughly enjoyed it. That jab was pinpoint. The body attack obviously put him away. Tremendous with the body punching, but he mixed in some hooks and some uppercuts and some right hands. I mean, really, Richardson Hitchens fought an absolutely flawless fight, in my opinion.
Again, we're going to go over this main event, the implications of it. Thank you for finding us. You can help us out by hitting the like button, by subscribing. Also, if you're seeing the video later, we are going to have some comments come in live with us, Dan, that we'll get to in a few minutes. But if you're seeing the video later, help us out and comment under the video after the fact. The interaction and the commenting under the video does help in the algorithms. If you enjoy the content on this page, we're doing this exclusively on YouTube, in the recap mode, and then again, help us out. All right, so let's pick back up on it. Again, we've had audience joining us in the last couple of minutes. Again, one-sided fight. Hitchens using the jab, Hitchens using a good straight right hand, but also the body work. He hurt Kambosos in the 5th round with a good shot, a left to the body, and eventually that's the punch that ends the fight. Just give me a little more insight into how Hitchens put this away so easily.
Well, he did what every boxer is taught to do pretty much from day one in the gym, is establish the jab. Richardson Hitchens' jab has been his money-making punch since he turned pro, and he's really perfected it. He really does. I never really thought about it, actually, until I heard some of the commentators talking about it, this week, and then obviously in terms of the application of it during the fight. He really does have one of the best jabs in boxing right now. I mean, he showed it against Paro. He showed it, obviously, tonight against Kambosos. It's very stiff. It's educated, as the experts would say, and it gets the job done. It's, he can use it like a rangefinder, but he also can put some steam on it and use it as a power punch to some degree, and he did that. But as great as his jab was, he was also able to land a lot of body punches. And when you can have a money punch upstairs and a money punch downstairs, your opponent doesn't know what to do. Do I cover my face? Do I block my midsection? He had, as I was taking notes in my computer file, as I'll write a story when we're done with this, he had it all going on tonight. And Kambosos was slow on the trigger. Even when he did land, he never really had, it didn't seem to me, and I think at one point Sergio Mora made the comment that he just didn't seem to have a lot of steam on those punches. Kambosos has never been known as a big puncher in the first place. he didn't really seem like, even when he landed nice shots, which were few and far between, that they just didn't have a lot on them. If you take a look, I don't have it in front of me, but I saw it very briefly. The CompuBox is overwhelming in favor of Hitchens, just, like lopsided landslide type of numbers. And you keep taking punishment, you keep taking punches, and the other guy's not taking much in return. The end result is usually this type of one-sided fight, in this case landing as an 8th round knockout. I mean, I don't know if there's anything, when I always think about to myself, when a guy wins a fight like this and you're his trainer, right? Or you're part of his team, and you want to obviously, you congratulate him, but when you get back to work and you go and you pick apart the tape and you watch it, like, what do you pick out to, like, say, even if you win the fight, like, here's something we need to work on. Like, I'm not an expert like a trainer. I've watched a lot of boxing, obviously. I watched that fight. I mean, I'm not sure I could find anything that I could really, really dig in and say, hey, we got to work on this. Because he did basically, it seemed to me, like everything really, really well, whatever it was. He kept his distance. His defense was sound. Offensively, he had it working with both hands, upstairs, downstairs. He controlled the ring. He dished it out, and it got so bad. And I've seen this happen a few times, but it's not common. But in the 8th round, as he's beating the living shit out of Kambosos, he's telling his father in the corner to stop the fight if you love your son. Like, he's telling the referee, do you really want me to keep doing this? Because he could have done it all night long.
Right.
As you would say, like Lionel Richie, all night long.
All night long, baby. Yeah.
And finally, the referee, Mike Griffin's a really good referee.
Yes.
And he finally started to put it on him a little bit. And even though George did beat that body shot on the knockdown, he did beat the count. Griffin knew that this man was finished and saved him from himself, because George, I have no doubt, would have gone back into the battle because he's a warrior, and he would have gotten more hurt.
Yeah. And again, he did his part and looked impressive doing it. Now, that leads us to one other thing, and you were commenting about this live in real time as the fight was going on. Why was George Kambosos given the mandatory status by the IBF at 140 pounds anyway? Just elaborate. Again, they have rules. They followed their rules, but he was overmatched. He doesn't look like one of the best junior welterweights out there. Showed nothing to indicate he's one of the best junior welterweights out there to be a mandatory challenger. I wish I had a really good response or answer for that. He never fought an official eliminator, to my recollection. Like, the fight that he fought against Josh Wiley that was a few months ago was not an official eliminator. He had lost in the IBF vacant title fight at lightweight in the previous fight, and he did move up. So a lot of times, and I have to go back and look at the ratings, it's not unreasonable for them to put him in the ratings, because that's part of the rules. If you've been a champion in the lower weight class, right, that can work for you. But I don't have a reason for it, other than most likely the situation was he wasn't number one, but what he was the leading available contender when the mandatory was due. So the IBF, they try to do eliminator fights, and when the clock runs out, if the elimination fight hasn't taken place, they'll assign the mandatory status to the leading available contender. And just to give you an example, remember when we had the situation in the heavyweight division between Ajagba, when he was supposed to have the eliminator against Martin Bakole. So that fight was set, and that fight would have produced the winner, would have become the mandatory for the IBF heavyweight title. But when they ended up, when Bakole lost to Parker, they obviously erased that as a possibility. And so they were never able to get the eliminator fight done. And therefore the time ran out. And when the time ran out, they appointed the next guy as the mandatory challenger in terms of Dubois' opponent. So that's sort of, I think, what happened, where the mandatory timing ran out and he happened to be the leading guy because Matias took another fight, and this is what we wind up with. But it's still fucked up, and they really need to address that in the rule book, because look, and I'm not like Nostradamus here, but there are few fights that I can think of in a long time where I was very, very, very confident that not only was this going to be a Hitchins win, but an absolute massacre. The worst style matchup in the world for Kambosos, who's looked like terrible in recent fights. I just thought he had absolutely zero chance to win. Moving up in weight as well, moving up to a bigger guy as well. And we said as much. The only thing you and I are disappointed about, and we were joking off the air before we hit the live button, is we both thought decision on the Bet US show back on Friday, depending on when you're seeing us here. It never got close to getting it. It looked like it was going to be over with in the 5th round. And it was a matter of, when does Hitchens want to put it away? And he did again with a body shot, and then like a right behind it, and toppled Kambosos. Again, I give Kambosos credit. He got to his feet after that, but he was in no condition to continue. So
no, his
fight
face
is
was all
stopped.
swelled
It's
up.
over.
His right eye was kind of a mess. He was
Yep.
taking a lot of punches. And, it's not that Hitchens is a devastating one-punch puncher, but what he does, especially, and tonight was a classic example. If you just beat on a guy enough, land and land and land, you thump him to death, basically. You're not going to get him out with one punch, but between the headshots with the jab that were rocking his head back all the time, and then you dig into the body, which is hard for anybody to take repeatedly like that, you're going to find your big punch, whether it was upstairs or downstairs, and he found it. And like I said, that was a brilliant performance from Hitchens. I mean, that made you want to see him again, because he was very skilled, big personality, very entertaining, and did the business.
First knockout for him, by the way, since going back to late 2022 in 5 fights. He gets it, and that you led to a perfect segue. Is it a unification bout next for him? What do we think on the other possibilities? A little jumbled right now in the junior welterweight division. Is it Teofimo Lopez? Is it somebody else that's perhaps on the horizon? What do you think?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you take a look at who the guys are with the titles, let's start with Gary Antoine Russell. He has a mandatory that's been ordered. Probably that's unlikely. He's the WBA champion. Richardson Hitchens is the IBF champion. Alberto Puello is the WBC champion. He's got a fight that's going to take place next month on the Turkey Al Sheikh's card that's taking place in Queens. That's headlined by Edgar Berlanga against Hamza Shiraz. So he's obviously not available right at the moment, but that fight's only in a few weeks. So if he wins, you never know. The biggest fight that you could probably make in that weight class among unifications would be him against Teofimo Lopez. Now, Teofimo Lopez obviously had the loss to Kambosos. He is a New Yorker. He was ringside. Kambosos, got that close win and made a living off of that win over Teofimo. Teofimo has gone on since then and rebounded. He became the junior welterweight champion, obviously, as he is still today. He did turn down the Devin Haney fight after agreeing to it. But the reason why a fight between Hitchens and Lopez is makeable, if someone wants to put up the money, is they are both managed by Keith Conley, who I don't think would love to put his two guys in together. But if that's what they want, the manager's job is to maximize the money for his clients. He would be able to play it straight down the middle and make that match. And if something that both guys want and the money is there, I mean, that would be a good fight. And I'll tell you what, the version of Richardson Hitchens that I've seen between this fight and the Parra fight, I mean, I think, has a superb chance to beat Teofimo Lopez, who we've seen beaten before. And even in fights we've seen Teofimo sometimes win, he hasn't looked that good. Although I must say, I am sure Teofimo, and him and Hitchens have known each other for a long time. I'm very, very confident that he would be up for that fight. Like, it's a lot easier to get yourself up for a fight against a guy like Hitchens in a unification, a guy you've known for many years, than it is to say get up for, when he's fighting like Sander Martin or something like that, which was not a known guy very well at that point when they fought each other. And that's just one example. So, but I don't know if the money's there for that fight. Teofimo said he's up for it, but how in the world do you take that fight when you know darn well that there was way more money on the table when he turned down Haney? You know what I mean? So I don't really understand that logic. I would, don't get me wrong though, as a fan, bring it on. I'm happy to see it. It's great, be a great promotion and probably a pretty damn good fight.
Again, if you're just joining us, here we're live after the Matchroom main event show, Madison Square Garden Theater, where Richardson Hitchens has defended the IBF Junior Welterweight Championship with an 8th round technical knockout as it goes down as a stoppage. Kambosos got to his feet, but then was fight waved off by the referee, Michael Griffin. So we're talking about that. We're about to talk about the co-feature fight. You want to take a couple of comments while we're live here, because the Savages are here.
Take a couple questions. Anybody's got a question
with us? We got all kinds of things that are going on. Let's see. This is Julio, who says maybe Subriel Matias. Would he be the guy that's maybe next? Any thought on that? Matias lost to Paro. Connect the dots. Hitchens beat Paro. Is Matias a possibility?
I mean, I guess anything is a possibility. But if I'm not mistaken, you tell me if I'm wrong. Am I losing my mind? Doesn't Matias have a fight scheduled?
Perhaps he does. And
well,
I would defer to you.
You can look.
You would look, but again, that would be.
Yeah, no. Matias is fighting Puello on July 12th.
All right, so that
Puello
rules him
wins,
out.
If Puello wins, he's still BC champion. If Matias wins, he'd be the WBC champion. And so at that point, you never know. It's possible, but there's a lot. Puello's no easy out. That's a tough fight.
Miles watching says first Hitchens. He means Hitchens performance. I would say I enjoyed. Again, it's the first knockout in about 5 fights.
Well, I don't think that it maybe wasn't as explosive, but it's not as though the Paro performance was unenjoyable. It wasn't like this one, but there was nothing wrong with that one. It just didn't get the knockout.
Mr. Put Them in the Ground says Kambosos' career after Teo shows just how bad Teo was suffering from his health in that Kambosos fight. Look, I know you've brought this up. I know he's brought it up, that he was having marital problems. He was having other health problems. What he had some kind of
it was more the health problems. He was
weight problems, whatever. The bottom line is he stepped in between the ropes and Kambosos beat him that night. And I'm not looking to defend Kambosos, etc. Kambosos was great on that night. And other than that, which we've said over and over again, you've said it again tonight for those just joining us, he hasn't done anything since then, and he's lost every significant fight since then. So
he is a. And I don't even say this like I don't mean this like to be a it's not that I dislike him or I'm trying to downgrade him. I'm just saying what the reality is. He is a one-hit wonder. There's nothing wrong with that. He had the one hit. It was a great hit. Buster Douglas had the one hit. He was a great one hit. I mean, I in my time of covering boxing, I kind of look at him sort of like I looked at Hasim Rahman. We've talked about this. Rahman with the massive upset of Lennox Lewis to become the heavyweight champion. He made a living off of that one massive punch to become champion. He made a living off that punch for like 10 more years and out of any number of major fights. Actually got another title that he kind of backed into, but never had another big win.
Yep.
Other fights that were significant, he lost, like against Lewis in the rematch and others that beat him. Oleg Maskiev in the rematch. He got a draw against James Toney in a title defense after having been elevated from an interim champion. His biggest win probably post Lewis was maybe Monty Barrett. I mean, my point is that's Kambosos because of the personality, because of the style, because of that great victory over Teofimo. Like he's made a living for the next 5 years off of that win. And I think though tonight, honestly, I'm not saying he's going to retire because who the heck knows, but he's done in terms of these level of fights, and unless he somehow manages to miraculously score another big win. But I think we've seen the last of George Kambosos in this level of a fight.
A couple of more comments here from people weighing in. Let's see. Martin in Florida agrees with you and says time for George to hang up the gloves, what you were just alluding to. Jay Deep watching. Thank you. Thank you to all of you that are watching. Says Hitchens is the truth off of that. Mr. Big Play Bray says that card was a good card tonight. And we're going to talk more about the co-feature fight here in a couple of moments.
Well, I mean, every fight on the card was a mismatch, but if you enjoyed it, I'm glad.
Tom is asking, what about Hitchens and Russell? He says, I think Russell beat Hitchens in the amateurs. I don't know. I would defer to you on that. Russell, though, what's the joke? Just like his brother, Gary Jr., Gary Antoine, fights like Haley's Comet. We see him like once every 18 months to 2 years.
He's more active than that. Let's not get carried away. He's more active than that. But he's got a mandatory that's up that
he has to ordered. He's been ordered or he loses his belt, right?
He's been ordered to fight Andy Hiroka from Japan, and that mandatory they were supposed to have. They had 30 days since it was ordered. They had until May 21st to make a deal or to be a purse bid. I've been actually trying to get an answer from the WBA about the status. I have to believe they probably gave them an extension to the deadline, but the point is that mandatory didn't go away. So unless something happens with that, Gary Russell's got to deal with Andy Hiroka at this point before anything else.
Great comments on the live YouTube show. We're here for a few more minutes on this Saturday night. Let's talk about the co-feature fight that saw Andy Cruz, the Cuban amateur star, get another win on the lightweight rapid rise and a knockout. You and I were able to cash on the Bet US show off the Cruz KO tonight. He dominated the Japanese
under
opponent.
For me, my friend.
And the under as well for you. He dominated Mishiro. One-sided fight tonight. Again, not a surprise. You said going in, this looks like mismatch, and it was a mismatch tonight. Elaborate a little more.
Look, Andy Cruz is a tremendous professional. He may have only had 5 pro fights going into the match, but there's a reason why they moved him quickly because he is 29 years old. He's not getting younger. He had one of the most brilliant and decorated amateur careers in the history of boxing. 2020 Olympic gold medal winner, and every other consequential tournament that you could ask about, be it Pan American Games, World Championships, you name it. He not only did he win it, but I believe he won all of them multiple times. Among his victories in the amateurs are multiple victories against Keyshawn Davis, including in the gold medal match in the Olympic Games. Just a brilliant professional. And he's really, if you take a look at the way he's developed so far in his handful of professional fights, he's fighting with a professional style, not the prototypical Cuban amateur style where it's more about touch and move. He's not afraid to mix it up a little bit. He trains in Philadelphia. He gets great sparring. He's in the same camp with Jerome Boots Ennis. He's trained by Boots' dad, Bozy Ennis. So he's got the background from the amateurs. He's got a good team behind him right now in the professionals. And he doesn't need to waste his time in 6-round fights and 8-round fights. He's had all 10 rounders until tonight's eliminator, a 12-rounder, but they put him in with Mishiro, who is a classic nonsensical IBF rated guy that had no business being anywhere close to a mandatory type fight or an elimination type fight. The guy can't fight. I mean, he had heart and his record speaks for itself. He never fought a blessed soul. I would tell you that in the 19 fights that Mishiro had going into this fight, that Andy Cruz's resume is way better than that, and he only had 5 fights going into this fight.
And Mishiro couldn't get out of the way. From the very beginning of the fight, Cruz could hit him with whatever he wanted.
The only thing success he had was Mishiro's success was hitting Andy Cruz's hand with his face. I mean, that's what it was.
And so that
could not get away from the right hand, had no defense, had no punching power, had nothing to speak of. An absolute mismatch of epic proportions.
And so that leads to the logical follow-up that we always do, which is how soon for Cruz. Again, he's now the IBF mandatory. So elaborate what this means here and a possible title shot and how soon for Cruz off the
Well, he's definitely going to get a title shot. He is now mandatory for Raymond Murataya. If you back up to like a week ago, you had the IBF champion Vasily Lomachenko retire. He was on a medical exception, so the mandatory wasn't going to be due until October for him. That mandatory was going to be due against Murataya, who, because Lomachenko had the medical exception, was permitted to have the interim title bout, which he won, just a month or so ago,
right?
Where he took care of his business, and he moved on and became the interim champion. And then when Lomachenko retired, he was elevated to the full champion. So his mandatory will be, I don't know the exact date off the top of my head. When his mandatory becomes due, that'll mean that Andy Cruz is up. I believe he's got enough time between now and the next several months to get in an optional defense, and then the winner of that fight would be obligated to fight Andy Cruz. So it should be the mandatory. I have to believe that Andy Cruz probably should be in the title fight, at the very end of this year, maybe the early part of next year. Perhaps he'll fight another fight in between now and then and risk that mandatory status. That would not be the first time. Plenty of guys have done it. I don't think they're going to put him in with King Kong, but Andy Cruz is capable of being involved in a fight against a top-level guy. So he's going to get a title fight if he doesn't lose. He probably would, I would think, fight maybe one more time because, like I said, I don't think that mandatory is due just yet. But a lot of it's going to depend on what Murataya's appetite is, what Top Rank wants to do. But look, at the end of the day, everybody knows the rules of the IBF. They're going to order the fight when it becomes due, and you can either fight the fight or vacate.
Again, Cruz now 6-0 with 3 knockouts off the win. Before we get out of here, other thoughts tonight on the undercard, the Matchroom undercard, including the big heavyweight Teramona, right, was also victorious with a big knockout. Anything else?
He's going to be a fun fighter, Teramona. This is a big, strapping, strong guy. And for a guy that big, has really good hand speed, quick hands, quick feet, a big personality. And just a tremendous punching power. Obviously, this was an Olympian for Australia in the 2020 Olympics, and he didn't turn pro with Matchroom. He's been with them only for a few fights, but he's got a big personality and a big punch, and he put it to good use. He fought Aleem Whitfield on this undercard, who was undefeated, who comes from a pretty decent amateur background, and he took him out in 1 round. I mean, it was a scheduled 6-rounder. But they could have scheduled for 20. It was going to go real quick. If you take a look at Teramona's his amateur accolades, I mean, obviously, I watched his Olympic fights. I mean, you could just tell he was heavy-handed. Now, in amateur boxing, there's not a ton of knockouts for a variety of reasons. But in his final amateur fight, he was in the Olympic quarterfinals. He gave a pretty good go against Bakhtir Jalilov, who was the 2-time Olympic gold medalist. He got eliminated. He had a terrible draw to have to run into him. In my opinion, that really should have been the Olympic final. Unfortunately, because the draw is a blind draw, he wound up on the side with Jalilov and had to fight him in the quarters. Took him the distance and lost a competitive fight. And as they talked about in the post fight with Chris Mannix on the broadcast, hopefully down the road, as the new generation of heavyweights emerge, he's only 27. He's not even close to his prime. John Love is 30, just coming back into the pro ranks. He's had one fight since the games. He has another fight that is now scheduled with Top Rank. That would be some type of attractive fight down the road, as I said, as the previous generation, the Fury and Joshua and Wilder and soon Usyk, as these guys start to get a little older and are either beyond their best or retiring or what have you, that new group of guys is going to come into play. Taramona, you think, might be one of them. John Love might be one. Obviously, you got Fabio Wardley. You got, Richard Torres. You got other guys on the way up. Obviously, Moses Itama. And those guys hopefully can mix together. And I would love to see Taramona continue to develop, do his thing, because he's exciting. He's got power. He's got a personality. And he's got a very a good style to watch and a heavy-handed.
All right. Anything else, or are we good there from the Matchroom card? We can get a couple of more comments in. Anything else of note off the Matchroom undercard? Or are we good?
I mean, that was the most notable stuff. I mean, Zaquan Moses, who is the cousin of Shakur Stevenson, he also won on the undercard. He went and continued his rise. In terms of being a good professional. He's a young kid. I think that was like his fourth professional fight. So there's plenty of time for him to continue to develop as well.
All right, I'm going to take a look here for the live audience. Let's see who else is getting in. This is Greg Allure, if I have that correct. He says, do you prefer Teo versus Hitchens next at 140 or Haney versus Hitchens at 147? What about Hitchens maybe moving up to fight Devin Haney? Does that make any sense?
Absolutely not. I want to see Hitchens stay at 140 for a little while longer. What's the rush? He's made one defense. He took care of that tonight. There's no reason. He made the weight by all accounts without an issue. And on top of that, if you listen to the interview that I had with Hitchens in the build-up to the fight, that's on an episode of our podcast from a couple of shows ago, he talked about how he wanted to eventually go up, and that specifically, he didn't really love the IBF situation. He loves having the title, but like a lot of guys that have the IBF titles, they don't like that day of the fight weight check where you can only put on 10 pounds. And he struggled with that in the Paro fight. He did really well with this one by all accounts. And so I'm not saying he's going to stick around and be a junior welterweight for a number of years, but there's zero reason why he needs to leave after one defense against, a completely shot George Kambosos. Let's see a real fight. Let's see a Hitchens against a Teofimo or something of that caliber. There's no magic. I know that he was calling out Haney after the fight, and I'm not opposed to that happening at some point in the future, but there's no magic to that. Teofimo Lopez against Hitchens, that's a main arena fight at Madison Square Garden. They'll sell a shitload of tickets for that fight. They'll talk a lot of shit. It'll be to unify the titles. It'll be for the lineal title. That's a big-time fight. Plenty of time for Haney. No one's knocking the doors down to see Devin Haney after the last performance. And especially not against a 40-pounder coming up again. Do your thing in welterweights. Get another nice win under your belt. Let Hitchens do his thing and unify or have a big fight at 140. And there's plenty of time down the road. These are not old fighters. They're going to be around for a while.
Babyface Drew says Hitchens gets laid out by Devin and Teo and Andy Cruz. Settle down a little bit there. I don't know if he gets laid out by all of those guys.
That seems bizarre to me.
Settle down. Off the way Hitchens
when's the last time Teofimo had a knockout?
Yeah. Let's see. Gail checking in. A PR pro from San Diego says, good evening, gents. Had to finish my own recap. Love these live shows. Thank you, Gail. Angel says, is it safe to say we've officially hit the stage where main events are starting earlier with shows being less stretched out? At least in this case, they got to the main event quicker. We've seen that some with the Turkey Al-Sheikh cards of get to the main event quicker.
A couple of reasons for that, though.
Yeah,
I'm not going to give out too much credit because, number one, part of the reason is because there was early knockouts and mismatches. And number two, they actually had another fight scheduled that because the opponent, there was another undercard fight that was supposed to be on the main card where the opponent had a leg issue and the commission did not allow the fight to go through. So that 8-rounder was canceled. That would have added to the show as well. So I like the earlier start times. Believe me, I love it. They were in the ring on ring walks at 10:40 Eastern time. I keep track of such things.
Yes.
But had the other fight taken place, it would have certainly been quite a bit later. And then obviously, if Taramona doesn't destroy the guy in one round, or if the fights are a little bit not as one-sided, Andy Cruz's fight only went into the 5th round. So there was a reason for that.
They got to it quicker. Paul says, watching us live on YouTube. Thank you, Paul. First time watching Cruz and Hitchens. Hope to see them both in bigger fights. We would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Byron says, if you know boxing, you know freaking well Kambo wasn't winning. Wasn't not winning. That's a double negative, but that's okay. We know what he means. Adam says, salute, Dan and TJ. Salute to you, Adam. Thank you for watching. Patrick says Bozy is laying a scary stable over there in Philly, meaning Bozy Ennis, the father of Jaron Ennis, and Andy Cruz training with him. Elaborate on that real quick and how it's helped Cruz some more.
No, he's got two outstanding fighters in his group. His son is obviously the number one welterweight in the world, although Eddie Hearn's been making the rounds in New York, talking to some different YouTube channels, saying what has been sort of the rumor that Boots is going up to 154. I don't think they have a set fight for him, but clearly he's leaving the welterweight division. But I think he'll be effective at the welterweight level. I think he struggled with the weight for a while. And Andy Cruz, Bozy's obviously done a really good job with him. And it's a situation where I don't think you had to do, they've been honing his professional style, but you don't have to teach him how to throw a jab. You know what I mean? You don't have to teach him the basics. He comes to you as a 29-year-old grown man with hundreds of amateur fights. And it seems to me not a lot of bad habits. Sometimes what happens when a guy stays amateur for a long time, the pro coach has to kind of break him down a little bit and fix some flaws and some things that maybe aren't what they're going to need to be as a professional. I don't have the eye of like a pro trainer in that sense, but from my layman eye of looking at it, it doesn't seem like there was a lot of things that needed to really be tinkered with. You can teach him to sit down a little bit more on the shots, which he's been doing, to stand in the pocket a little bit more and, move your head, move your shoulders and, improve your defense like that. But there was not any wholesale changes. So, sometimes a smart trainer is a guy that doesn't do too much tinkering. And it seems like Bozy has struck the right note, let's say, in the way that they're working with Andy Cruz.
Interesting choice there to go to the Philly gym. And as you said, tougher sparring partners, get him ready quicker on the fast track. By the way, Francisco in here. We love Francisco, is also chiming in on the Bet US show all the time. He says, thoughts on Murataya Cruz. If they were to fight tomorrow, who would you favor between Murataya and Cruz? Would you still make Murataya the favorite right now?
I would favor Cruz.
You would favor Cruz. That's interesting.
I think Cruz is spectacular.
All right.
And it's not any negative about Murataya. He's a hell of a fighter also. But there's levels in this game, as they say. And I mean, he may need, a couple of more fights, but, he's now in that mandatory position. And like I said, maybe that won't be the next fight, but it certainly will be in the next couple of fights. But Andy Cruz is a well-oiled machine. And not to say Murataya is not really good also, but
Andy Cruz would favor Cruz.
Andy Cruz is much more versatile. He can do a lot more. I would say this. He's got a lot more tools in the toolbox. Put it like that.
Champion says Dan Rafael is down to earth. I see. I do a pretty good job of keeping you down to earth for the most part. You stay pretty well in our hemisphere and in our stratosphere.
I'm not sure what that comment means, but I'll take it.
Down to earth. Okay, they think you're down to earth on a Saturday night late. Anything else in closing? Good stuff here tonight. We remind the audience we'll have a full recap of the weekend. Several people are asking off the air about the Donaire fight in Argentina. We got to have something for the recap pod. That'll be out on Sunday night.
I know the result that Donaire was the winner, but I need to go find it and watch it before I can make a comment.
That's correct. And by the way, you're also going to be recapping on your Substack the Matchroom card. So that's going to be out later on Saturday night and into Sunday. We'll have a full recap pod on the pod feed, audio only. That is coming Sunday night into Monday. We'll recap the Donaire fight. There's a good tease. Anything else in closing for the YouTube audience on the live show? We did this exclusively on YouTube again tonight after the Matchroom DAZN show in New York with Hitchins winning the main event. Anything else, Dan Rafael?
No, I like doing these lives. We have it fresh in our mind. We just saw the fights. It's kind of, I always had the, I'll just give you one little, I'll make it the equation. Back when I first was writing for ESPN, it was my idea. I used to do the weekly chats at USA Today, and then I was doing them also at ESPN. And I broached the idea with my bosses at ESPN because the chats that I would do on Friday afternoon were extremely popular. They were among the most popular. That was when basically everybody that had a beat at ESPN did a chat. And my boxing chat was, even though it wasn't a major sport like the NFL or Major League Baseball, it was one of the top chats in popularity because I gave it everything I had. We did it. We spent, I spent a couple of hours every Friday doing it, not 15 minutes, and it became like a big deal. And so when I went to the editors and I said to them, I have this idea. What do you think? What if we did the chat? We'll call, and it was like a pun on Boxing After Dark on HBO. I said, let's call it, instead of BAD, we'll call it RAD, Rafael After Dark.
Oh.
And when the big fights are over, I'll do a chat right after the fight, because I wasn't necessarily writing recaps on fights I wasn't at. Maybe we'd take a wire service story, or one of our stringers would do a piece about it. And so they were like, that's a terrible idea. Who's going to be up doing a chat at like 1 o'clock in the morning? And so I said to the bosses, I said, listen, would it be okay? I don't want to like do an argument with anybody. I said, how about this? What would you think if let's just try it? If nobody attends it, if nobody looks at it, then fine. Then we'll do it again, and that'll be that. They're like, okay, that sounds fair. So whatever it was, like a week or two later, we do a Rafael After Dark. They publicize it a little bit. I publicize it on the Friday chat. I'll be doing a chat after the show is over on the live fights on Saturday night. Come join the ESPN chat. And I had a chat. It was huge. Had tremendous amount of a number of people involved in it. And like that Monday, one of the bosses says to me, yeah, that worked out really well. When do you think you could do another one? So it kind of became a regular thing. And but here's why I'm saying this story. It has always been my perspective as a boxing fan, long before I was covering boxing. I didn't have a lot of my friends who were boxing fans. I had guys that would go like to the sports bar, or to their apartment, or this and that, watch the football game or the baseball game, but they weren't boxing fans. And when you see the fights, what do you want to do when it's over, right? You want to talk about it. You want to interact. You want to interact.
Right.
That was the way to do that. And so I feel like when we do these live right after the fight, even though we do our podcast on Sunday, it's still a day later, that we get to have that interaction right after the fight's over with.
And we had fun with this tonight on the Matchroom DAZN main event. Again, thank you for finding us. A lot of you joined us along the way. I see that with the live audience. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. You want to help us out? You enjoy the content? Subscribe to the channel. Again, great nostalgia on the channel. Dan's interviews on the channel. These live shows that you're seeing as well are archived there. So if you love that content, hit the like button and help us out as well. After the fact, comment on the video down below. That does help, from what we're told, in the YouTube algorithm to make some actual comments besides just in the live chat while the show was live on Saturday night. Comment down below about the Hitchins win, about Andy Cruz's prospects, about Rafael After Dark and the images that conjures up, if you want to go there, whatever the case is. With that, you and I will reconvene on the full Fight Freaks Unite recap pod on the pod feeds, audio pod, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. We'll reconvene, and that'll be out Sunday night into Monday. Other than that, I think we're good on a Saturday night, are we not?
We are. I'm going to go write my recap.
Go write the recaps on the Substack. Thank you for finding us. We appreciate it here on the Big Fight Weekend YouTube page. For Dan Rafael, I am merely TJ Rives. And keep it locked in for more exclusive content on this YouTube page. Good night.